Hey everyone, this is Ethan from RJM Music Technology here with Matt Schieferstein, known in the industry as Maddi. How's it going over there in Florida?
Oh, it's great. Hot and humid.
Yeah, yeah, we've been getting a little bit of that here in California, as odd as that is. So, how'd you become a guitar tech? What brought you to that career path?
Stupidity. I should have listened to my parents and gotten a real job.
I, I'm going into music at UCLA, and I sometimes I feel the same way.
Yeah, it's not the easiest lifestyle, that's for sure. So how did I get into the guitar teching? It was complete happenstance. I was working at an audio company, and I was a shop rat. I would sit in a corner at a workbench and fix stuff. And eventually they let me go out on some gigs, which was great. And then I ended up working at a lighting company, and I did the same thing. I was a shop rat, and I would build dimmer racks and cabling and all sorts of stuff. And eventually they let me go out on gigs. And a friend of mine was playing bass for a guitar player called Pat Travers, who was pretty successful, like late 70s, early 80s. Was kind of his big heyday, and he's still around, still gigging. But my buddy called me up one day and said, "Hey, Pat just fired his guitar tech. Are you interested in being a guitar tech?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure. I've never done it before, but why not? I'll give it a try."
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because I was actually out on a gig for a lighting company at the time, and as soon as I got home, I started rummaging through all the boxes that I had in my closet, trying to find a guitar tuner and peg winder and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, I don't know what I need. We'll figure it out.
Putting your starter kit together.
Exactly. I put my starter kit together, and I went over to Pat's house. He lived here in Central Florida, and I was living down here at the time. And I met him, and seemed like a really cool guy. I didn't really know much about him, and this was like early '90s, I guess, so pre-internet,
Yeah.
Wikipedia and Google and all that stuff. And next thing you know, his manager said, "Well, we're doing a one-off show down in South Florida, so why don't you come do that, and we'll see how it goes." So I met up with the other crew guys, which consisted of a front of house guy and Pat's manager, and we picked up a rental truck, went over to Pat's house. All his gear was stored in his garage at the time, and loaded up the stuff that we needed for this one-off gig and drove down to South Florida. And I think at the time, yeah, he had a second guitar player at the time, and I can't remember his name, but he had come down to the gig early, and here I am in the back of the truck. I got all the guitars out, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm trying to make sense of it all. And the guitar player, Eric was his name, comes up to me and says, how do you stretch out strings? And I looked at him and I said, "Well, why don't you show me how you want it done, and that's the way I'll do it." And even to this day, I still look back on that moment and go, "That was the smartest thing I've probably ever come up with on the fly."
Mm-hmm.
Because being a kind of a pseudo guitar player, bass player myself, he didn't really. I never really thought about that stuff outside of what I did at home. So that little comment to him really saved me and actually made everything go smooth that day, because he showed me how he stretched out strings, and I went, "Oh, I never did it like that before." So,
Yeah,
all right,
okay, we could do it like that, sure.
yeah, totally.
And the rest was history.
Yeah, we got through the gig, and I knew one song. Of course, I had borrowed some cassette tapes back then from my buddy who was playing in the band, and listened to a bunch of stuff. But I really only kind of recognized one song during the set. And Pat came up afterwards and said, well, hey, I'm going out on tour for like 5 weeks. Do you want to go? And I went, sure. And that was it. The next week we were driving the truck all over the country. Man, it was certainly not like what some people experience touring now with a bus and things like that. It was, we drove a truck all night long and
Oh yeah.
Ate really bad food and smoked a lot, and that was. I'm actually very glad that I had that experience early on, rather than just kind of walking onto some tour where you're on a bus and catering and all that stuff.
Right.
Doing a club tour and driving a truck and all the things, it gives you a whole different mental headspace and a whole different skill set.
Right.
That that I still find comes in handy to this day.
And at what point in your career did you realize, this is what I like doing, this is something I'm proud of? Did you have like an aha moment where you were like, wow, this is really special? Or did it kind of just roll really smoothly right from the get-go and just kind of snowball?
Well, yes and no. All of that, actually. The guitar teching thing, I think the aha moment was, when the band walked on stage and, and it was a smoky, dingy club, so it was, the band walked on stage and started playing the guitars and the drums and the whole deal. And it was like, wow, this is really cool, man. I dig this. I like this feeling. And even to this day, when the house lights go out and the crowd gets excited, it's like, wow, okay, this is cool. This is going to be a good day.
Let's fast forward to closer to present day.
Okay.
How did you meet John Petrucci, and when did you start out for him?
How did I meet John Petrucci? Well, the first time I met John, and he actually doesn't remember this, and I remind him of it occasionally, was I actually met Dream Theater back in '96, I guess, at Avatar Studios in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
And the guitar player that used to play with Pat Travers back in his heyday was this guy, Pat Thrall. And and I may be speaking out of turn, I don't know, but I think Pat Thrall's wife was the studio manager at Avatar. And Pat had a demo studio on the 3rd floor or something. And so we had a day off in New York City, and I went with Pat Travers to go meet Pat Thrall. And while we were walking up to the door of Avatar Studios, John Myung, the bass player for Dream Theater, held the door open for us. he just happened to be walking in for the start of their session. And I remember Pat Thrall taking us down to the main studio, and they were all there. Kevin Shirley was working on that album. I think it was Falling Into Infinity. And the whole band was there. So that was my first time actually just meeting them, and it was no, it was just, hey, how you doing? Great. Nice to meet you. But I had been a fan of theirs since they had come out with Images and Words.
Oh yeah.
So I was familiar with them. And then fast forward that about 2 years, I think, and I was working for Deep Purple, and Dream Theater ended up being the support act on a tour we were doing. So they were around every day, and that's how I really got to know them, and they got to know who I was. And then fast forward that a couple of years, they were going out on their Scenes from a Memory tour and needed a crew, and somehow or another there was some sort of involvement from some Deep Purple people or something. And I got a phone call saying, hey, this band Dream Theater needs a bass and keyboard tech. Are you interested in doing that? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? So my first tour with Dream Theater, I was the bass and keyboard tech. And then, of course, that's, I really got to start to know John Petrucci at that point. And I think in 2004 is when I actually became his guitar tech.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a tour with him back then, and then I'm not sure what happened. I just like their tour wrapped up, and I went on to do other things. So I was away for a few years, and then 2009 I picked back up with them, and I've been there ever since.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump into that disaster story you told me to ask you about just for fun. You said you were using a MIDI controller in Mexico for
Yeah.
G3, and what's that all about?
Yeah. So John got asked to do a G3 tour. I guess this was back in 2010, maybe. And it was South America, South and Central America. So we put together a little tri-axis rig. And at the time, we were using the Axis FX1 foot controllers, and John had been using those things for years, and they were a tank, man. You could drop them off a building and nothing would happen to them. And never ever did we tour with a spare pedal board, which in hindsight I will never do that again. But so anyway, here we are. We show up in Mexico City, and we're loading in, and Satriani's guys are loading in and getting set up, and I'm getting my stuff set up and get my pedal board loom run, and I plug everything in. I turn the rig on, and rig turns on. I look at the pedal board, and I see the green LCD display come on, but it didn't look right. Just from a distance, you can kind of just tell something was off. I went up and looked at it; it's just blank. And anytime I pushed a foot switch, nothing happened. So, I wonder if the power supply in the rack went bad or something. I pulled out a spare power supply. I plugged it right in at the pedal board. Did the same thing. So, in essence, it stopped working. And I called up Mario from Axis Electronics, and he had me go through and do a bunch of press this button and hold that and power the thing on and let's try this. And eventually Mario said to me, he goes, listen, we're going to get that pedal board fixed. It's just not going to be today. So you might want to figure out something for the show. And I went, okay. So here's me, and by this time, I called John and I said, listen, the pedal board's not working. I'm on the phone with Mario. We're trying to get it sorted out, but I wanted you to know, don't panic. I'll take care of everything. It'll be fine. So, which I might have called him a little too early in the day, but, it's, I guess, better in my mind. It's always better for the artist to know what's going on, especially if they have a good sense of gear and what they're doing, So I go to the promoter and I say, hey, listen, I need a MIDI foot controller, like a Ground Control Pro, even a Behringer, whatever their thing was, or a Roland, or whatever those things are. Do you know any guitar players that might be coming to the show tonight that would have one? And I went, okay, that I need to cover myself here just in case the promoter can't come up with anything. So I ended up calling Digital Music Corp in California. Right. Yeah. And because the whole thing is finding something in Mexico City, and I could have called any number of people, including RJM, but I needed my hunch was that there was a Ground Control Pro somewhere in Mexico City. Mm-hmm. So I call up Digital Music Corp, and I can't even remember who I spoke to, but I told him who I was, and I said, this is the situation. I need a Ground Control Pro in Mexico City today, this afternoon. Do you have a distributor in Mexico? And they said, yeah, but the problem is they're in Monterrey, Mexico. So I call up the distributor for Digital Music Corp in Mexico, and I explain the whole thing to him, and he says, yeah, I have one, but I'm in Monterrey, Mexico, and the only way I could get it to you is by putting it on an airplane. and having a courier pick it up in Mexico City and bring it to the venue. And I said, well, okay, let's do that. He goes, and we worked out the payment and everything, and I purchased it. I said, okay, great. I said, what time do you think it's going to get to me? And he goes, well, at best, probably 7 p.m. And that was when the show was starting. That was when Steve Lukather was opening the show. So that was when Luke was starting. And, with a G3 show, I think it's like a 45-minute set each guy has. And then, it turns into the whole jam thing. So lo and behold, 7 p.m. arrives. Oh, and to back that up, so the promoter says, well, I found a kid that's got this MIDI foot controller. It's an ART X5 or something. I don't know if you remember the old ART foot controllers. They were kind of this black with pink, like this neon pink logo hitting on them, right? Really not good. Back in the 80s, they looked really awesome.
Yeah, that says something.
It had 5 buttons on it, and all it did was patch changes. Yikes. It didn't have any CC information or anything. So, while I'm waiting for the Ground Control Pro to show up, I got this thing, and I went, okay, well, I better build some presets with the Tri-Axis and the Axe effects to get us through. And I built these just kind of very basic, like a lead preset with a delay, a rhythm preset with chorus, things like that. Just very basic.
Yeah.
And of course, John gets there for sound check, and he's just, he's like, okay, well, hopefully the Ground Control Pro shows up, but if not, we can deal with this for today. And we were going to be in Mexico City for 2 nights, so it was. The first night was a walk away and then come back the next day. So lo and behold, 7 p.m. rolls around, and this guy on a little motorcycle shows up, and he's got this box, and here's the Ground Control Pro. Wow, this is pretty cool. So I'm sitting up in the dressing room, and John's in there warming up and the rest of the band. And luckily I had downloaded the manual earlier in the day, and I read it cover to cover a couple of times, and I knew, I did notes as to what CC numbers each effect block was in the Axe effects, and what program numbers the Tri-Axis needed to be on for the different presets. And we also had some pedals that were on like a satellite pedal board that had a little loop switcher on it. Mm-hmm. So I wrote down a couple of those numbers that I needed for certain pedals. And I had my list, and I'm sitting in the dressing room. I power the thing up, and I go into program mode, and I program it blind in the dressing room. So I lay out the buttons, I lay out the presets, get everything dialed in. And John goes, so are we going to try that tonight? And I said, yeah, it's ready to go. He kind of gave me that look like, what do you mean it's ready to go? I said, well, I've programmed it. I just need to wait for Lukather to get done. I'll take it down, plug it in, and make sure everything works. Okay, cool. So Lukather gets done with his set. I go down, I plug in the pedal board, and it was, there's a setting in the pedal board. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I didn't have it in the right setting. So like effects, when you switch presets, effects were hanging over or not hanging over. Something was happening. Anyway, as soon as I figured that out, got it done, and boom, show went off without a hitch. And I got through the next 2 shows after that. The point to the whole story is when you're a guitar tech and you're working for somebody, and something like that happens, you don't have a spare. One, always carry a spare. I don't care who it is you're working for. If they say, I can't afford it, say otherwise. Yeah. Because that not affording it on the front end is going to save you a whole lot of hassle on the back end, if you can convince them to buy a spare. The other thing, too, is knowing, having a good knowledge of, an FX1 is a MIDI foot controller, just like a Mastermind GT is, just like an RS10 is, just like an FX1. like in my situation, I knew that a Ground Control Pro would be a suitable substitute that would be easy to implement.
Mm-hmm.
Even that little ART foot controller that this kid brought down would have been a suitable replacement temporarily,
Because
right?
it's all sending the same information.
Exactly.
It's just configuring it and how many buttons do you have, huh?
Right, exactly. And, it also helps when your artist is in the same gear headspace as you and goes, okay, you know what? I don't have the full complement of bells and whistles like I'm used to, but I can do what I need to do with this.
Right. Yeah.
And, luckily it worked out. I'm not sure what I would have done.
And so at that point, you guys were thinking, we need to find something that can work for us.
Yeah. So, we got back from that tour, and that was the whole conversation on the flight home was, that can't ever happen again. So, one, we're always going to carry a spare. And two, we need to find something that's going to be reliable. And not that the FX1 was ever unreliable. It's just, at that time, Axis Electronics was going through some restructuring, and they weren't making them anymore. So you couldn't, the only way you could get one is to buy one secondhand. So through some emails and Google searches, John had sent me a YouTube video one night of a very early Mastermind GT prototype. And he goes, hey, check this thing out. And I said, okay. And I'm watching the video and I went, wow, that's pretty cool. You can change colors. It's got LCD screens, so you can label your buttons however you want and change it whenever you want. And what we had done is, like with the FX1 and things like that, Steve Viestek, Thomas Nordig had come up with these labels. He had made these labels for Dweezil Zappa's FX1.
Oh, yeah.
They were really cool. They were all like, if it was a Van Halen Phase 90, it had like the red and white, black Van Halen stripes on the label, right? So you had a visual association along with a name, and which was a really cool thing. So over a few years, Thomas made us, I don't know how many dozens of labels for the foot controllers. But the cool thing when I saw the Mastermind was like, wow, it's got an LCD screen, so we can just label the button whatever we want and change it whenever we want, and not have to worry about peeling a sticker off.
Yeah.
So that was it was very intriguing.
And you can adjust the brightness on that, all the colors.
Yep.
If a button's in instant access mode, you could have it have a separate color for that.
Yep.
On and off could be different colors. It's a nice to have that visual association.
Yeah. And what was really cool is John and I talked about it a little bit, and we had already started discussing what the next rig was going to be. He really enjoyed using the tri-axis and the 290 power amp, so we wanted to expand on that some more. And so it was a good opportunity because we were about 2 months out from going into the studio to start work on a new album. And, it was a good opportunity to try some new gear, because the studio is always a good place to try new gear out, because, if it blows up, it's not, not the end of the world, because you're not, but it's also a good microscopic laboratory to test stuff out in as well. So, we started talking about the rig design, and I said, Al, you want me to call this company RJM about this foot controller and see what the deal is? Because it looks like it's really not anything right now. And he says, yeah, give them a call and see what the deal is. So I called up, and actually what I had done is I wanted to do some research, so I signed up on the forum. And I was having a problem logging in, so I emailed the support page, and Ron got back to me right away. He's like, wow, John Petrucci's tech is trying to sign on to the forum. Wow, this is cool. And, we just struck up a conversation, and I said, listen, this is what happened. And I had told him the story I just told you about the foot controller blowing up. And I said, we're in the market to try something new. And he says, well, when do you want one? Or when do you need one? And I said, well, we're going to the studio in January, so I'm going to be putting the rig together like between Thanksgiving and Christmas. He goes, I might have some by then, because they're actually not even built yet.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, send me all the information you have. I'm pretty sure it's, gonna have all the bells and whistles that we could ever want. And, let me know when one is ready, and we'll go from there. So in the meantime, I had started putting together the tri-axis rig we were going to take into the studio. And part of the thing we had talked about is John said, I really love pedals, which he does. We've got a warehouse full of pedals.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, I'd really like to have a rig that was all pedal based, but in a rack, so all the delays would be pedals, and, the reverb and the chorus, and everything would be pedals. So I said, okay, let's do it. So TC Electronics was kind enough to send us a bunch of flashback delay pedals and, basically all their stuff. Mm-hmm. And I started putting it together. Well, I called Ron and I said, listen, I need a couple of these little loop things that you make, these mini effects gizmos. And I like your little line mixer, but I need more inputs to it. Like 4 is not enough. I need at least 6 pairs of inputs for the stereo. And he says, well, I can make you a line mixer that's got more inputs. I said, okay, cool. So it ended up getting a couple of mini effects gizmos and this line mixer and a buffer splitter that Ron had maybe actually had 4 outputs on it rather than 2. Mm-hmm. And started putting the rig together. And I think Sherry called me one day and said, hey, we've got a Mastermind GT. We just made the first batch of 10 or whatever it was. Are you still interested in trying it out? I said, yeah, sure. So they sent it to me, and within 20 minutes of taking it out of the box without even reading a manual, I had it programmed, at least to the basic functionality of every loop was turning on and off with the corresponding button it was assigned to. And
wow. Yeah.
The tri-axis was changing presets the way it was supposed to. And that I thought was really, really cool because it was super intuitive. You just pull it out and you look after it's powered up and you get over the wow factor of the LCD displays and the whole thing. You look and go, oh, if I hold these 2 buttons, I can go into the setup mode. And, the way it's all laid out was great. And like I said, 20 minutes without a manual, I think is pretty good.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, the phone calls started to Ron, and Ron is still on my speed dial.
Yep.
The other thing about RJM, and this goes for a lot of companies, but their tech support has been nothing short of extraordinary. We were an early adopter of the GT. And in fact, I think one of the ones we have is one of the first 10 that were ever created, that were ever made.
That's awesome. Yep.
So John owns 2 of them now. I own 1. And mine serves as kind of the spare pedal board when we have, we have 2 sets of equipment. So when they leapfrog around, I bring mine out as a spare.
Yeah.
And, and the functionality of them is unprecedented. And I feel bad sometimes because I'll call Ron and I'll say, I need it to do this. And he goes, well, upgrade to firmware, whatever the version is now. And he goes, what firmware are you on? I go, 1.45.